Okay, so again, thank you very much for the invitation. I will present you today the project Kohlenrutsche in Vienna. We call it a Wohnprojekt, so it's a community housing project. We're not officially something like a cooperative in a legal terms. We're an association, but I will come to that a little bit later. The project process took about 5 years before the inhabitants could move in. So we started in summer 2014. And 2.5 years ago, in 2019, just before Corona started, people could finally join in this new building. The group is about 100 people from diverse backgrounds, like diverse groups of age, but also social backgrounds, about 65 adults and 35 children. And I think it's about 31 different households they're living together. And I'm happy to give you this presentation like in different roles or from different perspectives. First, I was involved as one of the project initiators. So looking for a group, looking for the users, looking for possible project partners, and also looking for the building site in this phase of the project. Secondly, I was involved as the architect, as my then team Studio UEK. We were doing this whole participatory architectural planning for several years with the group. And thirdly, I'm also a resident in the building, so I was contributing to establishing self-organization, decision-making, and so on. So I can also give you some point of view from that perspective. The project is located in the area of Nordbahnhof, which is one of the biggest inner city development areas in Vienna. It is located in the former train station, the northern train station, and it's, as you see it here on the, oops, sorry. Yeah, is there some, I don't know. Okay, so you see it in this little map on top that it's a very centrally located place, but which is also close to the Danube River and the natural resource of the Prater, of the big park, so it's a very attractive place to live. And the name of the project actually arrives from the main purpose of this train station, which was to transport coal from the north and the east of the former monarchy to Vienna, so the capital city. And then there were these coal slides or coal chutes where the coal was transported to like people who were carrying it into the city. And this is some kind of historical reference of the project. In the Second World War, this area was bombed, and after the war, the train station gradually lost its purpose, and it turned more and more into some kind of natural landscape within the city. And finally, like starting from the 1990s, it developed in one of these huge urban development areas that also now our project is part of. There's still some construction going on in this area, and by 2026, it's going to be about 20,000 new inhabitants living in this area. And Kohlenrutsche finally landed in these new surroundings in 2019. And it was very clear from the beginning that this project wants to become a very active part in these new surroundings. And this like activeness in the city, it's already formulated in our statutes, something like the constitution of our group. As I said, we're an association of residents, and there it says in this constitution, in our statutes, that we are a non-profit organization, that our main purpose is the creation of alternative, community-oriented forms of housing and living. That we have a focus on urban, flexible, participative, resource-saving and affordable housing. And finally, that the social and neighborly engagement not only concentrates is concentrated within the association, but also spreads out into the surrounding quarters. So this is somehow are the fundamentals of our group. And I think this is something that is very typical or common to a lot of community housing projects, that they focus on the benefit of such a house, of such a big group, of the infrastructure of such a group, meaning the building, and the benefit not only for the people that are living in this building, but for a much larger group of the neighborhood or the whole city indeed, and actually creating added value for the whole town or city. this goal or this aim is also somehow reflected in the program and the uses of our house. Mainly, of course, there are the apartments. We have 31 like standard apartments or normal apartments and 3 shared apartments, which range from very small 36 square meters to almost 300 square meters, which is a shared flat. The standard apartments have a very high architectural quality, so there are a lot of corner apartments or apartments with 2 sides, light from 2 sides. But there are also these special apartments. For example, we have 2 apartments for queer refugees, which we give away via an NGO for very good conditions. Or one, like this big one, the 300 square meters, is an inclusive shared apartment, which we see here, where 5 young adults with Down syndrome are living together with 4 students. And this is not something like assisted living, but it's inclusive, so it's really like they're embedded in the normal life as anybody else. And this is very like self-organized by the group of parents of these young adults that are living in this apartment. In addition to the apartments, we share a lot of spaces. It's about 20% of all the net floor area are common spaces. It's a very high number, even for Viennese terms somehow. I just read it out now. In the basement, we have a workshop, a laundry room, a food coop, and a youth and music space. In the ground floor, we share a multifunctional event space, a kitchen, and a children's playroom. And then these other common spaces, they go up until the 7th floor. We have a guest apartment, a garden room, a gym, and a shared studio. So it's kind of a luxury, I would say. But we're sharing all that, of course. And we don't share it only within the house, but also give some, offer these spaces also to our neighborhood. For example, this multifunctional event space, this is the place where we meet for our like regular meetings, but we also rent it out for very good conditions to other initiatives or groups of the neighborhood. And you see in the background, there is the children playroom. In the middle, there is the kitchen and the multifunctional space. You can use it in a flexible way by these sliding walls. This is an image of the workshop in the basement. And another one of this food coop where we purchase biological and regional products together for like good prices. And these 2 things, the workshop and the food coop, we are also planning to open it up for the neighborhood at some point until we have somehow established our structures and everything is running well, and also when Corona somehow encourages to open the house even more to a wider public. Other common spaces, like for example, this garden room in the 5th floor, which is adjoining to the roof garden, they are exclusively used by the community of the house, and we are doing like smaller meetings here or parties, barbecue, and so on. We're also having like 2 commercial spaces in the ground floor that somehow embed the project even more into the neighborhood. It's a kindergarten and an IT office that is concentrating on the work with NGOs. So the kindergarten is hosting 15 children between 2 and 5, and 3 of them are coming from the house. The rest is somehow from the neighborhood. And they also have this kind of small garden terrace outside of the house, so they're also kind of visible in the surroundings. And give some life to the house when other people are at work. Also, the outdoor spaces that we have somehow transcend from very private ones, our private balconies, over shared spaces like lodges, gardens, or this roof garden, the roof terrace, and to something that is more open to the surrounding, to the public. The private balconies, they're just wrapped around the house, like they're very narrow and there are no divisions between them. And we use them as, both for sitting there, but also like for giving the facade a certain touch with all these plants. And this, for example, is this patio in the basement, which is connected via a staircase to the surrounding garden courtyard, so it's open to public. And also allows for access to the workshop and the food coop, and also the youth space that we are going to open up a bit more for the surroundings at some point. So this interface of the building or of the project to the city, it's of very great importance somehow from the architectural point of view, but also through all these initiatives and projects that the people of the group, of the community are carrying out in this house. Some things have just started after we moved in, like for example, this initiative, it's called Fenster, so window, and it's like a group of people from the house that are organizing frequent or regular poster installations of artists that they invite on the window of our bicycle garage, and they are also forming this kind of discussion rounds and presentations for the neighborhood. Or for example, this project called Kretzeloase, a very Viennese term somehow. It's basically a DIY project that is funded by the city of Vienna to enhance the social and spatial qualities of the sidewalks of the city. And of course, all that was made possible or is made possible by a lot of work, engagement of individuals somehow. So this process took 5 years until the group could move in, and this is still going on, of course. 5 years, it's also for Viennese conditions, it's a rather good time. Other projects take much longer somehow, especially in this very first phase, initial phase, where it's important to find like the building site or a project partner. I will give you a short overview about this 5 years process now, the milestones that we reached, and also how we developed our organizational structures. So basically there were 3 important phases. The first was this phase of initiation and group development in the first year, which led to the promise of a project developer and the building site very fast. Then there was a very intense planning phase, which lasted only a year, but the major architectural decisions have been made with the group in participative planning in this phase, and also the individual adaptation of the apartments has been taking place. And in the end, the project was submitted at the building authority. And then, of course, like this whole construction phase, realization phase took quite a long time. And in parallel, of course, we also developed like our group further. So it started out in August 2014 with the first core group meetings with only 4 people involved, 2 from the office and 2 friends. And very soon we invited the first, for the first plenum, as we call it, or workshop. And we sent this invitation out to everyone in our personal networks that we knew that was interested in community housing projects. And what's interesting is that it's still not all these 31 persons are still part of the group, but I would say like 75% or something of those people that joined the first meeting are still part of the group. And very soon we started to organize ourselves to smaller working groups, and a year after that we founded our association. In this period we had to learn a lot from other already realized projects, so what's also happening now, I think. So we spoke a lot to other projects, people that were involved, and visited a lot of projects in Vienna, especially in Vienna and around Vienna. And we took very important decisions quite fast in the first few meetings, in which way we want to realize this project. So very fast we decided that we would not want to have individual ownership of the apartments, because we've learned from other projects that this can become like a threat to the project as soon as there's a generational change, or the apartments are sold privately to people that are more interested in the apartment than in the project itself. So we agreed that this association that we are going to form, everyone has to be part of that association. This will be the main legal body for any kind of contract. And we decided that we want to realize the project together with a professional non-profit developer. Of course, there are also other possibilities. We can also discuss those later, I guess. So there are now projects being realized in Austria via crowdfunding or direct credits or syndicates. But for us at that point, it was like the most reasonable somehow to look for a strong financial partner to realize that project. And we wanted to develop the project within the framework of Vienna's housing subsidies, which was really like important to make it an affordable project. Also, we decided to concentrate on a new building project, because existing buildings, which are of course, very meaningful somehow to deal with. They're basically only available on the private real estate market, and was just not affordable for a project like this. In this whole phase, we also had to learn quickly somehow how to work together as a group. As I said, we were forming this plenum, which is meeting regularly. We're still meeting every 6 weeks all together. And we're forming these working groups which we're dealing in the first phase, especially with the ways of decision-making, of founding the association, finding project partners, and the formation of the group. And the structure, of course, also changed during this 5-year process or 7-year process now, and was adapted to our needs. So first, of course, the board of the association was also introduced. And today we have still 6 working groups with different topics like law and finance, architecture, the process, group formation, renting out, and facility management are now these main topics that we are dealing with. And we're also introduced a management committee at some point, which can take like operative smaller decisions that have not to be taken by the whole plenum. And how are we taking decisions? This was, as I said, it was one of the working groups right at the beginning that we're starting out to look for different ways how other groups operate with decisions. And we have now established, I think, a very good routine in decision making. And this usually works like that a certain topic is prepared and discussed within the respective working group, and they're preparing and formulating a proposal for a decision, which is then presented and discussed in the plenum. Eventually, the working group has to rework its proposal by the feedback of the plenum. And then the decision is actually made by the plenum by consent. And this is a model that we are borrowing from the sociocratic governance model. And it basically means that every decision is accepted. Every decision that is proposed by a working group is accepted as long as no member of the association has a grave objection, as it is called. And this grave objection has to be explained and justified. And then it is, like all the members are looking for some kind of solution, how to react on this grave objection. And this is somehow very different to the idea of a consensus, where everyone has to say actively yes to a certain proposal, and where it's quite easy to say no also. And there's this problem of the veto that somehow can take like a lot of time somehow to find solutions. And it's also very different to majority decisions, which we really try to avoid as much as possible, because they're like bearing this threat of bringing fringes into the whole big group by separating those in smaller interest groups. And as I said, today minor decisions like operational decisions can be also taken by this management committee. So after we got this promise of the project developer, and also at the same time the promise for the building site, we were entering this intense planning phase where we're doing several architectural workshops with the group, and later we also did this individual adaptations. Maybe a few words to this project developer. We found the developer by very intense engagement of the architectural office. We were ringing doorbells more or less for a year. And then we ended up to have a direct commission, so we were not entering any formalized tendering procedure. I mean, in Vienna there are certain competitions launched by the city of Vienna, especially for community housing projects, but this was different. But it was already defined in the zoning plan that there in this area should be one community housing project, so there was an interest of the city behind. And with this project developer, we agreed that the association of the residents should become the long-term renter of the whole house. So we will never own the house, we will never buy it. And we're renting it as like one piece as a group, which allows us for a really high autonomy. For example, we can give the flats away to whoever we want. And we're also doing most of the parts of the facility management ourselves. And at the same time, we have very low financial risk. We had low financial risk during the construction phase, and now the financial risk is basically limited to vacancies. If like some apartments or these commercial spaces are empty for some time, which we somehow not expect at the moment, since there's a lot of interest in these projects as well. And all this together, it allowed for a very affordable rent for Viennese conditions. So we pay about €9 per square meter, and we had to do a deposit of €524 in the beginning, which we will get back as soon as we move out of the project. And this, we have to keep in mind that these €9 we are paying only for our individual apartments, and these 650 square meters of common and shared spaces, they're included in this rent. And it's really, for Viennese conditions, it's really a good rent. As I said, this intense planning phase, it was this main phase where the architectural office was in close contact with the group very regularly. So we were doing this, series of workshops with the whole group, and we were preparing these workshops together with the working group architecture. So people from the group that are also somehow were especially interested in the planning. One of these workshops was, of course, about common spaces, but also other main architectural topics, as, for example, the choice of the circulation system, or also the character of the private free spaces were discussed in in the big group. And we as architects, we gave always some kind of input lectures, small info blocks, and then there were discussions in smaller groups, which somehow resulted in a summary as a mood picture. And this was an instrument that was very helpful for us. So there was always some kind of, we used this, I don't know, either dots or cards or something, where there was some kind of image as a result of the discussion, which was neither yes or no, or like one group wants that and the other group wants that, but it allowed for some kind of, to read it as a kind of tendency of the big group. And this was a very good basis for us, for the planning, for the architectural planning, to go further. And of course, we were again and again presenting our design proposals to the group. And this instrument, I think it worked very well. Of course, there was also a lot of like confidence and trust between the architectural and the architectural office and the group of inhabitants. And one thing was, I think, as well, this we were also like future residents of this project, which somehow enhanced also the confidence. One other important workshop was, of course, when we were distributing the flats. We did that when the project was about 2/3 full. For certain reasons, we did it at that point. And after that, we started with this individual adaptation of the flats. So this is like the structural plan, more or less, of the building, which you see it's like the load-bearing structure. It's just these two cores and the exterior walls. And then we have these installation shafts, which are strategically positioned. And this floor plan allows for very high flexibility, especially long-term flexibility. But it was not our aim to provide as many different and custom-made, custom-tailored apartments for each like personality, but we wanted to provide a set of like good floor plans, standard floor plans that the residents later could adapt to their special needs. And this adaptation was made within a certain framework of rules. So the bathrooms and toilets, so the sanitary blocks, as well as the kitchen, this was fixed. But then all the interior walls, the doors, and partially also the windows in a certain grid could be moved by the residents in personal meetings with us, with the architects. And within this framework, also like special types of apartments were made possible. And these are all apartment types that have been realized. So on the left-hand side, you see a shared flat where 3 people are living together and working. So there are like elderly artists that are working together and sharing the flat. And on the right-hand side, you see something like a cluster apartment of 2 couples that have their private bathrooms and private rooms, but are sharing the kitchen and the living room. And here on the left-hand side, you see this very small 36 square meter, like the mini units. And on the right-hand side, you see the floor plan of this inclusive shared apartment that I was introducing earlier today. Okay, so and after we did all these adaptations and like the basic architectural planning, we submitted the project at the building site, the building authority, and then this whole process of architectural planning, like detailed planning, tendering, the construction site, and all this was going on. And also we like filled up the house. We did these group extensions and added 17 households to the group. And as I said in the beginning, like the first group was just like based on our private network somehow. So it was, in a sense, also kind of homogeneous. But when it was clear that this project is going to be realized, we were confronted with a lot of like people being interested, also being part of this project, and long waiting lists. So we had to be very careful somehow how to pick and who to pick as the future neighbors. And we decided that, we want to be kind of attentive somehow to share this great resource of this house with all these common spaces, not only amongst like this homogeneous group, but invest somehow in diversification of the house, and not in the sense of making it very like colorful and funny somehow, but really of sharing the resource with those that are somehow might be discriminated at the regular housing market. So we especially paid attention, for example, to people with a migrant background, or homosexual couples, or single parent families. And we had some help from a diversity manager of a university in Vienna in this process. Yeah, and in October 2017, there was the breaking ground. We did a little party at the site. This is when the group was already full, but of course not everyone was joining for that event. We made several visits at the construction site with the group. And then after 4.5 years of preparation, somehow we couldn't wait anymore, and we did this countdown party half a year before we were moving into the building in October 2019. We were all very excited and happy after this really long process somehow that we can finally physically come together. And of course, Corona somehow also hit us a bit. But nevertheless, the house, I think it's really started to become this active part of this new neighborhood of the Nordbahn area. And the work didn't stop, so we're still meeting every 6 weeks. Of course, a lot has been Zoom meetings the last 2 years, but we're continuously meeting. And the topics, of course, have changed. So we are not, we were busy somehow to fill our plans with our lives. It's a bit hard to read, but I mean, this is the ground floor plan. I don't go here into details, but you see more or less like this place where we gather, the kitchen and the children's playroom and the kindergarten and the IT office. And as architects, our aim was somehow to provide an architecture that is allowing for appropriation, and that is somehow something like a resilient and robust background for a diverse range of uses that is allowed, and is also enhanced or encouraged by the architecture. So our idea was always that the house is getting better and better the more it is used and appropriated by the people. So for this whole range of common spaces, this long list that I was reading out, we were organizing ourselves in small groups of 3 to 6 people or something that are like in charge of one of these spaces, in charge of the budget, of the equipment of these spaces, of like setting up modes of use, but also maintaining these spaces. And here, for example, you see the group of people that are dealing with the common studio, the work room in the 7th floor, and they're restoring some table legs as like a second-hand model for the working tables. Or the children's playroom, the group was buying new and used materials, or these wooden horses in the back, they were built together with the children in the workshop. Or the roof terrace that was equipped by the group with furniture to be used for different occasions around the year. Yeah, and now, like 2.5 years after we've moved into the house, all this is somehow not finished, and I have this feeling that it's going to stay with us somehow, this idea of how to appropriate the house and how to bind it to its surroundings. We also had some opportunities to celebrate, but we hope that now after this Omicron wave, somehow we can finally do our big opening party by the beginning of the summer of this year. Okay, and if you're interested a little bit more, there's a small YouTube video by Open House Vienna that you can have some more insights into the project. And there's also been like an article published in Slovenian a few months ago on different projects of mine, but also Kohlenrutsche. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hvala, Katarina. Thank you, Katarina. Zdaj je čas za vaše vprašanja. Razprava bi potekala v angleščini. Zdaj, če bi pa kdo rabil pomoč pri prevodu, smo pa seveda na voljo. Tako da, please. Se vas malo slabo vidim, tako da kar na glas. Aha, ja. Še en mikrofon? Če ne.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for this wonderful presentation. It's really inspiring to listen to that, but also extremely frustrating because we're trying to do something similar, but it seems that we're not getting anywhere. I have a lot of questions, but maybe I would just pose one regarding the rent, which you mentioned, like €9, and not just for some terrible tiny apartment, but really a fascinating space. To give you some context, this is like 30–40% cheaper than an average apartment in Ljubljana, which is of much less superior quality. So yeah, how are you able to achieve such a rent?
Yeah, I mean, it's not our personal achievement. We have to commit somehow. This is, of course, only possible through the long history of Viennese social housing policies. I mean, Vienna is somehow internationally known as an example for really 100 years of social housing, which was also not of course, there was an interruption during the Nazi time, but since then, also it was a very continuous process of also adapting the structures of social housing to realities and to contemporary questions, I think. So I think it's really only possible within this framework of subsidies. I mean, there's also, it's just, Austria is organized in these 9 federal states, and it's very different from state to state. So Vienna is also within Austria an exception, I have to say. So if you just cross the border and go to Lower Austria, like our neighboring region, the conditions are already quite different. But I also have to say that there is an initiative, a platform, who are connecting all these community projects in Austria, and they're gathering, I think, around 100 projects, and they're advocating the interests of these kind of projects in every federal state and also towards the municipality. So there's still also outside of Vienna a lot somehow to do in this direction. And I don't know, I mean, if it's important for you to know, but within the Viennese subsidization system, there are 2 ways somehow to get a project funded. One is for normal apartment buildings, and the other one is for homes, and normally this is for student homes or homes for elderly people. And like a lot of these community projects go into this direction and use this track of the homes being funded as a home, because it has certain advantages. Like, for example, we didn't have, like it reduces the number of parking places that you have to provide by 90%. So we only had to build 2 parking lots for this whole thing. And I mean, everyone knows somehow, or as we architects at least, we know how expensive parking lots are and how maybe little you need them when you live that central in an urban area, yeah. But and also like common spaces can be funded within this track of subsidization. And maybe we can also ask like the later in the roundtable discussion, I think, or what I've heard is that they're actually like within the city of Vienna currently working on a subsidization track that is especially tailored for community projects. And this was like part of the coalition agreement or something of these 2 parties that are now in lead in the governance. So there's really like some kind of, after several years, one has to say, political support from the city of Vienna also for these kind of projects.
Thank you very much. Še kakšno vprašanje? Any more questions? Yeah.
Hello. Thanks for sharing your story. Maybe I have a question regarding your decision-making process. As you mentioned that you try to somehow not fall into this voting schema where people make 2 groups and fight. And I'm interested if you had some rough times when making some decisions, or did you manage always to somehow unite?
I mean, there have been, I think there are several answers to that somehow. I mean, of course, there have been some decisions that individual persons somehow were not in tune with, and also maybe left, like, of course, we also lost some people on the process, yeah. Not that many actually, but a few. And I think, for example, this decision that we will not buy the house, for some, this was a reason not that they didn't want to be part of the project anymore, because for them it was somehow, I don't know, psychologically important to own a house or so. And in the end, you know, those people left. Others somehow maybe changed their mind, I would say. And of course, we're having conflicts, but they're not so much based on like 1 or 2 decisions that we're taking, but it's more a little bit more subtle, like layers of a whole group. I think every bigger group somehow has to deal with conflicts in one way or the other. And we were, honestly, we were a bit too busy the first 5 or 6 years, somehow to pay attention really to this issue. And it's just now more or less that we're starting to closely look to some reoccurring issues somehow, also with an external moderation or so. And this is more about like invisible hierarchies or something like that, very typical for groups, I think.
Ja, izvolite tam. Mogoče še samo, če se lahko vsak predstavi, prej sem pozabil.
Hello, my name is Marieta, I'm an architect. I'm wondering if you decide to move, like a family moves out, what is the procedure? You're not the owner, you have to pay the rent, so the community has to confirm somehow this, or how does it work?
Yeah, I think it's really not a problem if someone moves out. I mean, we are paying back this deposit money, but as soon as we have someone new moving into the apartment, the money is back. And it's still really, it's such an attractive place to live, like the whole area, but also the project itself, that we will find immediately other people. And it's really more a question how to choose, like who is going to move into this apartment later on. So we're really not afraid of this vacancy or something like that, yeah. And I mean, one thing maybe that's important, when I was talking about these individual adaptations or so, we had a look also at the architectural office that we're not doing this very extreme personalized apartments. So it's also like the interest of the association is that we can really easily rent the apartments out to the next tenant, the next family or household, however. And we were not, I mean, but there were also not that absurd kind of wishes or so, but we would not allow, I don't know, hexagonal spaces or something within this structure. Yeah. But we didn't even have to discuss this with the group. But one idea was also that like the private investments into the apartments should not be too big. So you're not like, there's just a standard floor and the standard tiles and so on. And the only thing that you had to pay privately is the kitchen. So if you move out, it's more or less your risk how much money you put into the kitchen. The rest is more or less equal in the same house, in the whole house.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Yasmina, I'm also architect. I want to ask you how you choose these people to live together. What is the main point that you choose them? They are almost the same age and the same, I don't know, please tell me.
Okay, yeah, so in the very beginning, we were just like sending these invitation emails to all our friends or people that we knew somehow that wanted to live in such a house, so it was more or less homogeneous. And of course, like the how do you say, the wish to live other than in a small apartment with 2 kids and 2 parents, and so it's especially big amongst people with small children. So everyone is rethinking somehow how he or she wants to live. But on the other hand, there's also a lot of elderly people who are living on their own and who don't want to live on their own like for the rest decades of their lives or so. And like we did 2 like group extension rounds or so, and this was really like a very sophisticated process with questionnaires and points and so on. And we were really trying to support groups, as I tried to explain, that might have a harder time at the normal apartment market, the normal real estate market, to find apartments like people with a migrant background or homosexual couples, or also single family parents that would somehow profit even more from such a community project. So with these extension rounds, the group got much more diversified, also in respect to the age group somehow. Yeah. So at the moment, it's, I think the question, we have these 33 apartments or something, and it's, I think 15 are indeed children, families like with 2 parents and 1 or 2 children, and the rest is very mixed.
And are there some special problems or something like this when they are living together, when they are so different from ages or something like this, or what they have in common? So, because it's also one thing when people are moving together, how they think they should live, and what they...
Special programs amongst these groups, I mean...
Or something special that it is important to know when they are moving together.
I mean, of course, now these years that we're moving in, the children are quite present, and they were not present in the whole planning phase. So for 5 years, they didn't come to the plena, and so, and this, maybe I think they were not so much on the radar for some people. And then when we moved in, suddenly there were these 35 children also being part of the group, and it changed somehow the group. And I think for some people, I mean, they're really present, and some like it more, and some maybe are a bit disturbed by everyone running around in the hallways or something like that. But this is it's very small scale, something we can really talk about these things, and it's also okay to say if you're somehow disturbed, and that's fine. I think like the elderly people, it's maybe 6 or 7 people that are over 60, and they somehow tried to form a little bit more as a group. But then I think they tried like 2 or 3 times to make some meetings together, but then they found out that maybe they have a lot more in common with, I don't know, the 30 years younger neighbor from next door than with the person being the same age as they are. And I think this is also something that we're learning, that it's really very individual and personal, like to whom you have a close relationship. And of course, not all of these 100 people are my closest friends.
Yeah, we probably have one last question, or yes, okay. I don't think we have much time, just saying. No, we have here. I saw that first.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Maybe one or two.
I'll try to be quick. Alan from the Ministry of Environment and Spatial Planning. In terms of preparing sufficient legislation, also here in Slovenia, I would like to know what was the main criteria to get these subsidies from the city of Vienna. Was it the amount of rent, like the affordable amount of rent, or just your non-profit way of working, like the cooperative, or just to assure the sufficient number of new homes, like you said?
No, I think it's, I mean, I'm not really an expert on this, because as an architect, you're not so much involved in this whole procedure. But one thing is that already the price per square meter for the land, it's limited somehow. The building costs are limited, so I think they were like 1,700 euros per square meter usable net floor area. So this is limited by the legislation. And then regarding the inhabitants, it's also these projects are addressing a certain group of income. So you have to have a minimum income, which is kind of low, but also like provides a certain security for these projects. But there's also, of course, this maximum income, which is not that low. So every one of our group more or less could fit into this, but we're no bank managers, something in this project. So this is like from the perspective of the users and from the architecture. As I said, we have to fulfill certain regulations like these parking lots and so on, and also the size of the apartments. They have to fit into these regulations of the housing subsidies, so they cannot be like larger than 130 square meters, for example, but also not smaller than 30 square meters. So this is all regulated within the terms of the like Vienna Housing Fund subsidies.